So full disclosure, I don't plan on like going into the minutia of any games. I
Sure.
tend to think
Good.
of things in kind of like high level about the types of strategies that were employed rather than the particular like individual movements.
Okay.
Um,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. But if you're interested, I could start talking about some of the games at LVO, and
Okay. Yeah.
how Gellerpox were the second highest scoring victory points faction in at LVO.
Very
Uh,
interesting. Yes.
so
Before we get into that though, I did you take a full 20-man roster and you picked units as you needed, or you had one list, two lists?
I took I don't remember. It was like 17 or 18 models. I did not take any sludge grubs. Uh,
You
I
mentioned, yeah.
I don't. I felt that I brought a few different variants of effectively two lists. One list is two Nightmare Hulks and seven bugs and mutants,
Yep.
and that's kind of the idea behind that list is one of the Nightmare Hulks is a veteran. This is the Distraction
Okay.
Nightmare Hulk, and
Right.
one of them is the Sergeant that is also a combat specialist, and that's the one that actually like gets things done.
Okay.
The veteran, I basically always used the tactic to move them up the board, advancing, because you can advance as a veteran and then still charge in the charge phase,
Yes.
as long as you don't advance in the movement phase. Or well, there is no movement in charge. Yeah, so you can still
Yeah.
charge
Yeah.
after move advancing as a veteran.
Yeah.
So that would allow me to try and get turn one charges off with a Nightmare Hulk.
Sounds
Uh,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and that usually throws people for a loop when they're like, oh yeah, that thing moves 4 inches. Oh no, that's in my back line.
Just
Uh,
very quickly, could you give us the stats of a Nightmare Hulk, like toughness, strength, just so we
yeah,
know how scared we are?
strength 5, toughness 5, uh, 4 wounds, disgustingly resilient, 6 up save, hits on fours. So it doesn't always hit, but it has 3 attacks, and the sergeant has 4 attacks. Combat specialist
Okay.
sergeant has 5 attacks.
Right.
That's my Gnasher Screamer.
Mm.
And when it hits with that strength 5 attack, it's got -2 AP and deals 2 damage. So good against everyone but Necrons and
So
Harlequins.
it's like a slightly less survivable but much harder hitting Lictor, if you want to view it
Yeah.
that way. Okay. Okay.
Well, disgustingly resilient. Uh,
Oh
uh,
yes. Yeah.
four
Yeah.
wounds, disgustingly resilient. So
That's true.
I just assume anything that's shooting at it will have some AP. It doesn't have an
Okay.
invulnerable save. So with a 6 up
Yeah.
regular save, I assume it's probably not going to get its regular save. But
Yeah.
on 4 wounds, disgustingly resilient is just as good as an invuln save.
Sure. Okay.
Um,
Yep.
yeah. So worse than invuln save on 1 wound, but just equally good on 4 wounds in my opinion.
Okay. Fair.
Uh, so uh, So my strategy with that team, two Nightmare Hulks and seven smaller critters, and I always max out on Ice Stinger Swarms.
Okay.
Always.
Those the
Is
12-inch moving ones? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So you can take a maximum of 4 of those.
Okay.
Uh, and that so or at the very least that's what comes in the box. Like
Right.
the
Right.
Rogue Trader box. So I always take 4 Ice Stinger Swarms no matter what. And a leader Gellerpox Mutant. Taking a leader Nightmare Hulk is just a waste of points.
Okay.
uh,
Fair.
because then you want your Nightmare Hulks to be able to do something in addition to just being big.
For the same
Uh,
reason that everyone takes a grot as their leader if you play orcs. Yeah.
yeah, or
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
cultist with Heretic Astartes.
Sure. Yeah. They're not meant to
Uh,
play the game.
yeah.
Yeah.
So uh, I'll advance a veteran up the board and attempt to turn one charge. I'll move my combat specialist up the board, uh, usually on the other side of the field, so that then I've got something strong on both sides of the field,
Sure.
and then I'll position basically all my bugs that are not objective holders. So leave my glitchlings to hold objectives in the back line. Position all my other bugs up forward for the turn two charge, or to serve as distractions, or both. Uh, and then I'll hold back my leader behind the biggest line of sight blocking thing I can find.
Sure.
Um, so that's one army. And the other army that the other variant that I would bring is one Nightmare Hulk as either a veteran or a combat specialist. I could
Okay.
take either. And then if I took him as a combat specialist, then I would take a mutant as a veteran. I love the
Okay.
veteran advanced tactic as a melee team because it allows you the option of a turn one charge against a team that hasn't already positioned in the middle of the field, and it uh, shifts the opposing team's calculus on where they can position to avoid their stuff getting charged.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and that is 13 models, and that allows me to. That's my anti-horde team, uh, and honestly, I like that team more. Having played both teams at LVO, the problem is my friends, don't play at like a top tier competitive level. Like I
Yeah,
said,
sure.
they're smart. They know their teams, but and I was finding a lot of success with both lists against them. So I wasn't too sure about the relative strengths. After LVO, I'm definitely going to go with the 13 model list more than the 9 model list. But that's very
Okay.
similar, just has a lot more bodies on the field and only one Hulk.
Okay. Okay.
Um, in case anyone's wondering, I do not recommend the 19 model Gellerpox team. Just fielding all bugs and glitchlings and mutants gives you no kill potential.
Sure.
I may have said that kill potential doesn't matter that much. Having one thing that can deal with the enemy lictor or plague marine is kind of nice.
Sure, yeah. I mean, at the very least, even if a Tyranid swarm, 20-man swarm, uh, the Hormigons aren't exactly killy, but they are more killy than bugs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, I I actually think a 12 team list, 12 model list, is. I think that the benefit you get on more models after about 12 is it really starts to diminish. I
Are
think
we talking generally here, or specifically with Gellerpox?
generally.
I agree. Continue.
Uh,
Yeah.
So, past about 6 to 12 models is huge because that lets you double up on objectives, lets you double up
Yeah.
on choke points, lets you contest more areas of the board once you lose a few models. But past 12 models, for range stuff, the number of models is not super important, right? Like
Sure.
frag cannon, death watch versus 3 guardsmen, like you know. You just look at who has the better shooting once you have enough models to screen them and block off choke points and
Yeah.
contest board control. For melee though, you can only get many models in.
Yeah.
There are only so many models that will be able to fight, and there's only so many parts of the board, so many objectives on the board. Once you're contesting all of those and fighting in the choke points, having better models in that fight might be more useful than having
Yeah.
more models to replace those that die.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think that the 20 model Tyranid list that people have been a little bit concerned about did win LVO. I think it's a very great list. I don't think it's going to be the best list
No.
going forward.
Sure. For example, I think if you and I've spoken to others about this as well, so I should probably give them credit. But no, it was all me. It was all me that had this thought. If instead of if you swapped out how 8 of those Hormigans and swapped in another warrior, you probably have a much more effective list.
I would say so. Or I would probably so this is my playstyle. My playstyle is very much get in someone's face, hit them hard, like early, and try and get them off their game by having to deal with something already in their lines.
Yeah.
I would take a veteran lictor,
Yep.
uh,
Sure.
and one warrior. I think that with an all melee team that can hold like field like contest many objectives, it's all right if your kill team breaks round 3. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you can get ahead, like an insurmountable or mostly insurmountable lead, going into that, and use one CP on someone to hold an objective round 4 just to make sure that you don't get 0 points that round. Max they can get is 6 points in most of the competitive games. As long as you can get at least 5 points ahead of them, boom.
Yeah, yeah.
guarantee that you at least die. So I would take a veteran lictor, just like move that into. I think it's more important once you have those 12 bodies to figure out how to ruin someone else's day and stop their plans from working than it is to guarantee that your plan has more consistency.
Sure.
And the lictor gives you that option. Although, having the warrior as a backup in case, I see a team that, is like that I don't really want to send the lictor in first round, then just swap to a warrior and be like, okay, well, now we're just avoiding break test or nerf tests.
Yeah, no, sure. To be honest, I probably should have said Lictor. I wasn't really thinking of using the warrior uh, solely for the synaptic range there, but they're pretty good in
Oh,
combat as well. Yeah.
sorry, that wasn't just because you said warrior.
Oh,
It's
okay,
also
fair enough.
because a lot of the people I spoke to at LVO during the finals round. I was talking with a lot of other people while we were watching the finals round, and a lot of people were saying, "Let's should have taken two warriors."
Okay,
One warrior
interesting.
the warrior got taken out first round. Should have taken two
Yes,
warriors, and
huge.
I disagree with that. I think taking a warrior and a veteran lictor makes more sense in my mind.
Would you go with a veteran Lictor even in arena when really you're using that veteran move to open a door?
A veteran is dead in arena. There is one
Okay.
map. There is one map for matched play where veteran is useful. But even then, you can try and make the turn one charge. That's where you start like right across from each other with no doors blocking you, and it's just like, oh, I can see into your house. That's the only time where it would be nice to be like, haha, I'm 1 inch away from you.
Do you specifically mean veteran on a lictor, or do you just mean veteran is not needed to be taken in arena?
Veteran does not need to be taken in arena.
Outrageous statement. So what I
Wait,
mainly
wait,
hear,
wait, wait.
okay, okay,
Let me say veteran might still be useful from the perspective of like avoiding nerve tests on something.
oh,
So
okay,
like
sure.
it might be good for like holding an objective, but the power of the veteran in regular kill team is getting that advance off and getting that mobility. And in on most of these maps, that means you get to open a door. No, you
Yeah.
can't even do that because you can only open a door in the movement phase. So you can't even
Um,
open the door with the veteran.
no, so the ruling there is that if you begin your move next to a door in the movement phase, you can open it. However, if you end a normal move next to a door, then you can open it. And the movement phase clause has a comma between where it says the first statement and then the second statement. And so people are currently reading that as the veteran move because it's behind that comma in the clause means that you do not need to be in the movement phase when you finish that move. That is
Okay.
how people are reading it. I think GW could go either way. They sometimes pay attention to clauses, they sometimes don't. Yeah.
Let's say you can open doors
Let's
with
assume you can
yeah.
for debate.
I still don't think that's worth it. If you
Okay.
unless the only reason that would be worth it is if you're taking a team that just doesn't have enough models to open doors.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Fair.
So yeah, maybe it allows Space Marines to be an all Space Marines list to be slightly more competitive in
Yeah.
that they don't need one model left behind. Uh, but I don't really consider that to be a competitive team in Arena. So
Okay.
because they simply don't have enough bodies to contest the maps where there are six objectives
Okay.
or like five where there's more than four objectives.
Okay.
So sorry, I just got Arena like last week, so I'm not as familiar with the match play missions yet.
No, fair, fair.
Uh, uh, so I think veteran is dead unless you have to rely on it to help shore up a weakness inherent in your army.
So low model count teams probably one might say have to take a veteran because otherwise you're leaving somebody
Yes,
behind. But you then argue that, well, a low model count team isn't competitive. So take a veteran if you want, you're not going to
it's
beat me.
uh it can win. It's not going to win tournaments.
Hmm.
It's uh it's hard when most of the missions do have two doors that need to be opened for you to play.
Yeah,
and some of them have three.
yeah,
So uh, at that point, that plus only being able to put one model on each objective means that you're simply going to be outnumbered on most of them. Uh, so it reduces mobility on what was already a team struggling to play the game.
sure, yeah.
And you can take gimmick lists like four frag cannons if you want, but taking four frag cannons, they're kind of like just naked and exposed, and I think that there's a lot that reasonable teams can do to handle that list in arena when there aren't as long firing lanes.
So, yeah. I mean, I want to argue with you because I'm currently trying to make Grey Knights work in Arena, and I've only got 5 models. So,
I think if you're gonna make it work, I think you have to accept that you will only be contesting. Like, I think you have to make sure that you get secondaries, like
oh
you
yeah,
pick
yeah, yeah.
secondaries that allow you to not have to contest the whole board. And I
Oh,
think you
definitely.
just
Yeah.
you accept that half the board is not yours. You win one half of the board, and then hope that round four you just move to the other side of the board, get one extra objective, and win a close game.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that relying on basically having to win the fighting and still having more models than your opponent in round four is very difficult. Like, it'll happen, but
Sure.
it's a hard push. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
in that case, yeah, I would say take a veteran on one of the Grey Knights so that you can open a door early.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, I yeah. Grey Knights are not easy to play in Arena. That's all I'll say so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, let's move on from my depression and crippling life anxieties with Grey Knights. So that's your general thoughts on, or well, before we move on to LVO, do you have any other thoughts on Arena in general and competitive in that specific regard?
Uh, I think so. I'm going to make a prediction here. I'm not going
Okay.
to try and predict what the next best list that'll win the next tournament will be. But my prediction is that multiple people will try and bring the 19 Gaunt list to
Yes.
tournaments,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
good players will know how to counter it, and
Yeah.
it'll struggle a lot. And so what I mean by that is I
Yeah.
think that list is actually worse so people on Reddit think that that list will dominate arena because it will be good at holding
Sure.
objectives.
Yeah.
Every model can open doors, and
Yeah.
it with limited firing lanes, shooting teams might not be able to compete with it,
Okay. Yeah.
like shoot them off the board. Uh, I disagree. I think that the best counter to that list is and will continue to be uh, fielding models in the choke points.
Yep.
At which point, then the strength of having 20 models, most of them are just sitting behind their own lines, kind of waiting to get into the action.
Yeah.
Uh, and arena, every single like regular corridor or doorway is small enough that it can be blocked by one model.
Yes.
So any team, even Grey Knights, can if they get out onto the board early. Especially if like they win initiative round one,
Yeah.
can try and move forward and advance up the board and block off uh, uh, Tyranids from getting past the midpoint of the field. At
Yep.
which point, then the strength of that list is neutered. Um,
Yep.
I don't get me wrong. I still think it's a good list. I think it takes time and energy and skill to beat, but I think that good players will know how to beat it. Um,
Yeah.
I would also say something that's interesting about Kill Team Arena. Uh, do you know what will really be in? I don't think it'll happen every game, but when it happens, it will be hilarious. Uh, Good measuring will beat that Kill Team list. By that I
Be more
mean
specific. Yeah.
Synapse only
Okay.
extends 12 inches. You can't measure auras through walls or doors. You have to measure
Yeah.
around. So, in regular Kill Team, if you move the Tyranid Warrior out to the middle of the field, they're vulnerable. So
It covers everything basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you move it to the middle of the field, it covers everything. But if you hold it back, it only covers half the board.
Yeah.
Uh, and a lot of people would hold their model back.
Sure.
In Kill Team Arena, uh, measuring around corridors, that increases the distance by a quarter, a third.
It doesn't go
Uh,
far, oddly.
it doesn't go
Yeah,
far. Uh, and so that 12 inches might feel like 8 inches.
sure.
Uh, so the cheeky thing, the thing I'm excited to see in tournaments, if people can pull it off, closing the door on the Tyranid warrior. If you
I like
close
it.
the door, everything behind that door suddenly has to make nerve tests,
Yes.
and
Okay.
you can end up breaking a whole like 2/3 of a Tyranid team without ever killing the warrior.
That does sound very fun, I've got to say. I hadn't thought of that before. Yeah.
I think people. So I was talking to Miguel in the like right before the, or sorry, I was listening to Miguel and Michael talk in the finals, and Miguel mentioned that he was not familiar with how nerve tests worked because he was so used to synapse covering everything.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
and when people, if people go to tournaments and they measure, like, no, these ones are actually outside the 12 inches once you account for walls, and they
Right.
say, guess you have to start taking some nerve tests. That's going to, because those are the ones that'll actually be on the front lines. Those will be the
Yeah.
ones that are
Yeah.
contesting the middle objectives. Uh, that means the front lines will, many of them will be shaken. That that could be a game turnaround.
Yeah. No. Definitely. Definitely. Because
So
obviously
that
anything that's broken can't actually contest an objective. And therefore, you win.
Yeah. So I would say those are the two main strategies I expect like top players to use to beat down kind of the most players bringing that 19 gaunt list. Top players who bring that list obviously like have strategies to counter that,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
in response. And can avoid putting themselves in that situation. But I think that's a common pitfall that Tyranid players will come into when they first start playing that list.
Okay.
On a
Fair.
so
No, I would agree. Of course, saying that you would have to get to the door, and as we've already discussed, a single model can create a choke point and stop you from getting to a door. So,
which is why I don't think it'll happen very the closing. I don't think the closing the door will
no,
happen
no,
very often. I
no.
think the holding the choke point and measuring synapse range around walls will be how what actually happens.
Yes, definitely.
But closing the door would just basically like be like a. I mean, it's like the Geller shift. It's like if you can pull it off, it. I
You
mean,
should do it.
you
Yeah,
should win.
yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah. So Uh, so yeah, those are my thoughts on where I think Kill Team Arena competitive will be. I think it's we're gonna be seeing the best lists being in the 10 to 15 model range because I
Okay.
think a lot of people have also talked about the limitations of the 20 model list as
Yeah,
you can't swap things in or out. I
yeah.
agree with that. So and you can't mind game by like having two lists and then being unable to prepare for
Sure.
both.
Yeah.
I think that we'll see 10 to 15 model lists predominating. Once you have 10, you can compete with a 15 model list just fine. And I think anything under 10 models will struggle a lot. I think
Okay.
we'll we'll see flamers doing well
Okay.
because if you charge outside of 9 inches, you now have a tactic to still get the flamer off.
Yes,
Uh,
that is true. Yeah.
So out of line of sight and out of 9 inches, I mean you can flame Harlequins, which is amazing. Would
Yes. Yeah, they're gonna love that. Yeah.
I'm considering the next time I go to a kill team turn, I'm like probably gonna bring Gellerpox, but I'm considering like a
Okay.
Zangor heavy and a warp flamer, like a Thousand Suns list.
I want to talk about that because that's what I'm building at the moment. Don't tell my Grey Knights. But uh, I yeah,
I'm a
I'm
bad
building one.
person to talk to about that because I'm going to tell you that I love Zangors more than almost anything.
Well, I think that a Zangor only, well, Zangors and one sorcerer, combat sorcerer.
Yeah,
That's
combat sorcerer.
probably a viable list. I don't
Yeah.
see why it wouldn't be. You know,
Oh, I combat sorcerer. The real problem that I have with Thousand Suns, I'm always tempted to be like, well, I want a combat sorcerer,
of
and I
course.
do want a warp flamer. And that Soul
Okay.
Reaper cannon would be nice.
It's a
And then
nice
all of a
weapon.
sudden I'm
Yeah.
looking and I'm like, wait, I can only field like 8 models.
Those
Uh,
rubric marines are expensive. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think you have to decide what you want. I agree that this combat sorcerer is probably better than the warp flamer. I mean, combat sorcerer, warp flamer, and what's math? 8 Zangors,
Sure.
something like that. Uh,
Yeah, around
th-
that. Sure.
that gets to that 10 model minimum that I was saying.
Okay.
Uh, and unlike bugs, Zangors can open doors. Uh,
Yep.
uh, and so I think that could be reasonably interesting. I love it drops the Soul Reaper cannon, which is unfortunate, but I would rather in arena,
You'd rather have the
uh,
flamer for the auto hits on the Overwatch, I assume.
and being able to just use that tactic to auto warp flame anything that charges,
Yes.
uh, is really effective. I think
Yes. How are you? All your Zangors with the Zangor blades with the AP -1, or are you taking pistols?
pistols are a trap.
I agree. I agree. Just wanted to make
I
sure.
would also and this part is not really advice for competitive, but I
Okay.
think the shooting phase is unsportsmanlike.
Okay. We're
Uh,
definitely. I'll cut that bit out. But yeah, yeah.
no, I'm a big fan of melee teams. I think that they're
Sure.
more interesting for me to play because instead of focusing on target priority, you have to focus on positioning correctly.
Yes. No, it's a very fair point. I mean, certainly my concern of taking only Zangor blade um, Zangors is that, well, they're 32 bases. They've got no shooting, and if you've got what is it, 10 of them in a list, well, you can't really get all of them into combat. So should you take some of them with pistols?
Uh, I think uh, I think that the reason why you take 8 Zangors and 2 Rubric Marines in that situation, you have 6 Zangors, or swap, 5 Zangors and a combat sorcerer in the various choke points.
Yeah,
That gives you 2 Zangors to hold back behind your own lines on objectives, like in your own deployment zone or like that are not going to be in combat. And then you've got your Warp Flamer that you can position wherever it's most useful.
yeah.
And then that leaves you 1 additional Zangor to sub in when someone dies. Uh,
Are you keeping your twist spray at the back, or is he getting stuck in?
I think you keep him at the back for 2 rounds, and then you
Okay.
move him forward. Yeah. So once your leader once your leader has generated a few CP for you, like during round 3, if your leader dies, that's only 1 CP lost.
Sure.
Uh,
Okay.
in round 1, if he dies, that's 3 CP lost.
Yeah.
So it's as time goes on, getting the twist spray into combat becomes more and more plausible, more and more reasonable, much
Fair.
less costly.
Okay.
Uh,
Fair.
and arena allows you to keep him from getting shot, which is good. I like that.
Yes. Yeah. 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 It's if you
It
don't
does
want
mean
to lose your leader, you probably can make that happen. Yeah.
it does mean that the kill the leader tactic will basically never be useful.
Very true. Yes.
So there's some competitive advice. Don't take kill the leader.
No, that is a very good piece of advice, actually. Yeah. I mean, unless you're facing Grey Knights because they only have 5 models, and you kind of have to do something with your leader.
Fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Before we jump on to, well, unless you had any other tips for me about Thousand Suns. Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
I think we're no, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Before we jump over to your LVO games, a quick thing that was brought up by Michael. It's something we know about from main 40k. Do you play 40k at all?
I play 40k. I actually play Age of Sigmar more than 40k,
Ooh.
which is incredibly confusing jumping between that and Kill Team and 40k because the rules are slightly different in each of them.
Yes.
But I do play some 40k.
Okay. So, well, I'm sure it's the same in Age of Sigmar. Um, and Michael proposed this as an idea for Kill Team as well. It might have been in Part 2, which you won't yet have seen, but is releasing on Monday. The idea of gatekeeper
Well, it gives me
lists.
something to look forward to on Monday.
Oh yes, it's a good one. So gatekeeper lists, which I'm sure you can kind of figure out from the name. But in main 40k, that would be, for example, a list that someone that maybe isn't the best player, although good players play it too because it's an amazing list. But so what is it? The skill floor is low, so anyone can play it, but also the skill ceiling is, well, mid. Um, but so for example, in 40k, that would be Castellan Knights and Guard because they're incredibly powerful, and the strength isn't so much in well-positioned tactics, but in just you have very efficient models for their points costs effectively. Um, in Kill Team, and I'm sure that exists in Age of Sigmar as well. I don't know what it would be, but I'm sure it exists. And of course, in Kill Team, we were discussing that Tyranids have now placed in, I want to say, in the top 10 for all of the large tournaments that have occurred, which have been Nova, Warhammer World, and then LVO. And of course, we have a Depton coming up end of this month. So obviously, we will then have a lot more data, which will be very interesting. And they've always been the Horde list. We've also had Death Guard. They've appeared in the top 10 at all of these as well, I believe. Um, which I'm not sure if they were at LVO, but that's irrelevant to the point. Um,
On the BCP app, they didn't have Gellerpox Infected, so I
oh,
put
okay.
Death Guard as
Oh, right.
the closest. So I guess,
Right.
according to BCP, they did.
Okay, well, that's how statistics get skewed. And so, there's this concept of gatekeeper lists. What would you say are the gatekeeper lists? I know that I've just thrown this term at you and you've had no time to think about it, but this is when the best answers happen.
I think the way gatekeeper lists play out in practice, whatever lists won or had multiple placings in the top are the most likely to become the gatekeeper lists because I
Sure.
think that they're people learn people who can take a list from that did well from the internet and then attempt to bring it to a tournament to replicate that success. Even if they're not top players themselves, they still learn that list, right? Like they
Yeah.
learn how it functions. They're able to do it solidly. They're able to do it
Yeah.
competently.
Yeah.
And so uh, any list that is able to win a tournament and then gains popularity will become, I think, the next gatekeeper list. I think there are a
Sure.
lot of options for that. For a time, it was, that like 7 model Death Guard list at
Yep.
the beginning of Kill
Yep.
Team. Then it was Plasma Guard spam.
Yep.
Now it's Tyranid 19
Tyranid Swarm.
Gaunts.
Yep.
I think and I think some of the old gatekeeper lists continue to stick around a little bit. I
Yep.
was surprised that we didn't really see. I at least didn't see any plasma guard at
No.
LVO.
No.
Uh, uh, but I do think that uh, once something has gotten popular as a good list, it becomes the gatekeeper list.
Sure. Sure.
Uh, so I would expect Tyranids going forward. I think the
Yeah.
other standouts would be high floor, as like high floor ones that haven't been winning tournaments as
Mm.
much, are Harlequins, and I think
Okay.
that's well, they don't get popular because they've won tournaments. They get popular because they have dramatically different rules that are very straightforward, and you can do it off of one box. So it's
Yeah.
easy to get into, high floor, and stands out from other teams. And it's, what they do one thing, they do it very well.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. Much as you said, it was kind of Death Guard first because anybody looking through the rulebook can instantly look at Death Guard and say, "Oh, T5, disgustingly resilient and really strong weapons. That's a good team. I'm not very good. Well, I feel so bad
Huh.
saying that. No, no, that's not I'm not saying that people that play Death Guard are bad, but I mean, it's like, oh, that seems fun to play. I will instantly be good at the game. They take that, and then everybody has to have an answer, and if you don't have an answer for it, you probably won't get past it. So you have to have something in your roster, for example, Plasma Guard spam. And so then you had to have an answer for Plasma Guard, who are very scary on paper. I mean, they're putting out a lot of shots. Although I've got to say, I'm actually a little bit surprised that AdMech Plasma Calibers didn't become more of a thing. But whatever, people went Plasma Guard. And then now, what counters a bunch of high strength shots? A swarm, because you don't care about the high strength shots.
And what counters a primarily melee swarm? Something that has at least 12 models, but is better on its front lines and has fewer models wasted. So I wouldn't be
I
surprised if
agree.
we saw uh, beating some Tyranid lists or something that can kill the warrior early.
Yes,
Uh,
potentially like Harlequins, who can
yeah.
just run past
So
all of the little bugs.
Harlequins, I think, have a bad matchup just because like volume of fire is what's best against them.
Yes, yeah, that is true. That is true.
But yeah, so either something that can kill the warrior or something that at the choke points simply is able to put in better models than Hormagaunts.
Yep,
And
fair.
also still has at least 12, 10 models.
Mm. And hopefully the movement to get there before the 8-inch Hormigans, because 8-inch
Yeah.
movement is very nice.
Eh, you can always like if they get there first, you just countercharge. They hold the objectives, but if you have
True.
better models, you can push them in,
Yep.
and consolidate onto the objectives after you kill.
Yeah.
Like it's not ideal. You want to get the first turn and be there first, but
Mm.
still.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Um, yeah. One thing I will say,
Mm-hmm.
I think playing one of the. This goes back to a question you asked. Oh wow, an hour ago. Uh,
Hour and 13 minutes we've been going. Yes.
uh, this goes back to a question you asked a while back, which was why I played a team that I don't think is the best.
Sure.
Um, I think that when you play a team that can win off of its own strengths and it
Mm.
doesn't force you to go and figure out strategies and tactics to be better than the team that you are playing as. Uh, it doesn't push you to improve yourself as much.
Okay.
And so it's easy to rest on your laurels with your combat flail or your 19 gaunts. And
Yep.
you don't learn the higher end tactics as fast. People still improve, don't get me wrong, through
Of
practice,
course. Yeah.
but they don't have as much incentive to do so, and I think that stunts their growth a little bit. Which is why
Fair.
I would recommend don't play netlist teams. Play a team. I mean, Asuryani, right? Like play a team that you like. That you like the way it plays and it fits your play style, and just learn it front and back and practice against a lot of different other teams and know how you'll play against those teams rather than trying to play the flavor of the month.
That's entirely fair. However, one thing I have noticed every time you've mentioned why you played Gellerpox or why other people should play something, you have yet to once mention theme and narrative. Do you care about that at all? When you play, or are you purely there for the rules, there for the competition and the play style over the theme?
I won't play models that I consider to be aesthetically displeasing.
Okay,
So anything that's like old resin and like hasn't been updated in a long time, I try not to play it.
okay,
I prefer to play chaos.
okay.
Just as I don't I like the aesthetics of chaos. Um, but what I find most interesting about the game, what really does it for me, is the interplay of how everyone is positioning and
Okay, yeah,
how people move to, I love melee versus shooting games. I love the
okay,
play between screens versus charges versus retreating, and stuff like that. And so playing an
Right.
all melee team helps me maximize those types of that interplay in the games I play.
Okay. Fair enough. No, I agree. I think actually, kind of, this is unrelated to theme almost, but if you had to try and tell someone, someone says, I've got a tournament in a month, what can I do to improve my play? You don't want to say, take this roster, although that might very well save them the day. You want to tell them, learn how to position your models. Then it doesn't matter what list you're playing, you will be competent as a player. Whether or not your models are competent, that depends on your list building skills. But you as a player, all you can really do is be the best at positioning
Absolutely.
them. Okay. Unless you have anything else to say regarding competitive kill team arena in general, how about we dive into your LVO matches?
Sounds good. So we've talked a lot about Gellerpox, which makes this I think pretty
Yes.
straightforward.
Great.
My first game was against Necrons, and something that I haven't talked about are Gellerpox matchups.
Okay.
Gellerpox are really good, really really good. I have never lost against an elite shooting list
Okay.
because if an enemy team has fewer than 8 models and they are primarily shooting and they don't have any real melee capacity, they get round one. After that, you tie them up and you just have more models on the field, more objectives. So elite shooting lists, best matchup. Second best matchup, this is going to sound weird. Cheap horde melee lists.
Okay.
Cultist spam with brutal assault weapons,
Yep.
Hormigaunt spam, Poxwalker, and some melee Death Guard spam. I
Okay.
mean, those lists, either you move out with a veteran and just block off the choke points, or
Yeah.
at which point then you control the objectives, or since they're fielding like kind of horde stuff, you field horde stuff as well, but one Hulk that just breaks through their lines at one point, and
Yeah.
so they don't have a response to that unless they can get their unless they brought a flail, which
Okay.
I guess is a bad matchup. But bad matchups for Gellerpox are ones where I can't exploit either the choke point or tying something up forever. So lots and lots of just volume of shooting models is hard for me because I can tie up some of
Sure.
them, but I can't tie up all of them. And really elite melee teams like Harlequins or
Yeah.
multiple flails and cleavers on Death Guard, also very hard because my bugs can't do anything to that,
Yeah.
and they can kill a Hulk. So round one, I'm up against Necrons, and I'm looking at his
Mm.
list, and I'm like, this guy can either go 10 flayed ones,
Yep.
or they can go some immortals, some warriors, and like one or two flayed ones. And I'm like, I've got my poker face going, and I'm
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this is my list, and just trying not to give away that 10 flayed ones would wreck me. There's very
Right.
little I
Okay.
can do
Okay.
against like my Necrons, Gellerpox with the Hulks deal 2 damage. That's 2 chances to roll a 6, and they
Right.
reanimate. And so you did nothing. And the bugs can't do anything to a flayed one. They've got toughness 4, so you wound on 6s.
Yeah.
So I have nothing that can go up effectively against a flayed one. I need to outnumber them if they bring flayed ones, and if they bring 10, I can't outnumber them.
Sure.
So I would say that's a particularly bad matchup for me. And so I was just like, like smiling and like with my poker face, and he says, "Yeah, 3 immortals sounds good. 2 warriors, 2 flayed
Okay.
ones," and I'm like, game over. So from that point on, it was standard issue for me. Put my eye stinger swarms behind cover, but like right near where they are, or
Yeah.
in position to charge from out of line of sight. Nightmare Hulk advanced, gets off the turn one charge and ties up two immortals. Bugs charging into the flayed ones and dying, and then new bugs charge into the flayed ones and die. But it's all right. I can throw away bugs,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
in order to on 2 flayed ones in ways that I can't against 10 flayed ones.
Yeah.
And I win that game with 18 victory points. The
Oh,
max that you can
right.
get 9 from primary, and you
Yeah.
can get 9 from secondary.
Yeah.
That was a very straightforward game for me because he went immortals.
Okay.
Uh, I would say if I ever play him again, he's going to go 10 flayed ones, and I'm going to have a real difficult time. There are things I can do, but mostly
Yeah.
try and force him to be locked up at choke points. But if he gets turn one, uh, if he gets initiative on turn one, unless I really outplay it and get lucky, it's probably game over.
Okay. Fair enough.
So that was game one, and after game one, I was at a one of the top. I was, everyone who scored 18 points was at a
Yeah.
top
Yeah.
table
Yeah.
game two. And so game two, I was up against Harlequins, and this is gonna sound strange, but I've only ever played like 10, 11 kill team games before coming to LVO.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I've spent a lot of time, thinking about different teams and fiddling around with different teams. And I've played like I've played as six different teams before I settled on
Right.
Gellerpox. So
Okay.
I've played as a bunch of different teams and played against a bunch of different teams. No one in my circle has played Harlequins
Okay.
against me, and I've never played as Harlequins. I know what they do. I'm familiar with it, but not having that experience really hurt. And I made two key mistakes. The first mistake is I think I should have taken more bugs. I took two Nightmare Hulks and I should have
Okay.
taken more bugs.
Yeah.
And the second mistake is I was concerned that he'd be able to melt me or fusion gun me or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and kill Nightmare Hulks. And so I played too conservatively with the Nightmare Hulks I had.
Okay.
And he did rolled well on his saves against my stuff, but the real thing is I played it too conservatively. I was afraid of getting charged and having my big stuff get killed. And if I had just brought 13 models and one Nightmare Hulk, then I could have felt pretty confident about that one Nightmare Hulk holding an objective and just trying to swarm the board and be like, yeah, you'll kill a bunch of my bugs, but I am going to win on objectives.
Sure.
That would have been the right move.
Okay.
Harlequins, I think, are a bad matchup for me. Their volume of attacks and quality of attacks means that my -1 to hit on my Icinger swarms don't bother them; they'll hit
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
And their fusion guns are really good against Nightmare Hulks or just
Yes.
volume of attacks. Like 4 wounds doesn't matter as much when someone makes 4 or 5 attacks against you.
Yeah.
So Harlequins are a bad matchup for me. I managed to get 6 victory points out of that, but that was. Mm, I definitely could have played that better, a lot better.
Okay. Was it actually a close matchup in the end? Like it
No.
wasn't like a oh, okay. He just steamrolled.
And part of the reason why it wasn't close is so I took two Nightmare Hulks. One of them I used to like try and like contest an objective, and that one ended up like holding 3 Harlequins on that one objective.
Hmm.
So they held the objective, but like I was occupying half his team with that one Nightmare Hulk. And the other one I was kind of like slowly slogging up the field, trying to like position myself for like a charge at a future point, but trying not to get charged and like not to get shot at with the fusion guns in
Yeah.
return.
Yeah.
And I should have just accepted that I'd get shot, hoped I survived, and then made the charge
Okay.
instead. But I was playing too cautious, and so he just every round would just move his arm like anything within 12 inches out of 12 inches away from my Nightmare Hulk, and didn't even bother to charge me, and was just like, yeah, this one makes 5 attacks, he's super scary, okay, he can't charge. And
Interesting.
so
Okay. Yeah.
uh, I was able to like hold one objective with that guy, but like while he slaughtered the rest of my army,
Wow. So that's when your opponent sees through the distraction card effects. Just says, "Oh, I'm not going to touch it."
and which neutralized 31 points of my army and my
Big.
combat
Yeah.
specialist and my sergeant for my
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
unit. So he played very well. I made mistakes, and uh, yeah, that's not ideal. I now know how to play against Harlequins better in the future.
Okay.
Uh,
Good.
and so I think I learned. And we'll hey, sometimes these things happen. Um,
Indeed.
Good reason to get more practice games in.
Yes. So quickly going back to that, you said you'd only played like 10, 15 games. Do you mean ever, or with Gellerpox Infected?
Ever.
So
So I
that's
actually started playing Warhammer in July.
okay. With Age of Sigmar, then was that
Uh, with I kind of got into Kill Team, Age of Sigmar, and 40K
right?
around the time when Kill Team launched.
Oh, okay.
And so I, try and peer pressure my friends into playing Kill Team with me,
Yep.
but they're bigger into 40K.
Okay. Fair enough. Um, like, so obviously I'm just a bit blown away that you've only played like 10 games before you came fourth in the tournament. Um, w- uh, do you think you would have done better if you'd had more time? Like, if you got more matches in, or you kind of had perfected what you knew you wanted to do, and it was just a case of doing what you wanted to do?
Michael Michael, in his interview with you, said that something he does is he plays games against himself
We
as
call it
lots of different
sad hammer.
teams.
Yeah,
Fair.
yeah.
Well, wasn't gonna call it that, but
Well, I do it, so
uh,
you know.
uh, I would say if I what I need is I do best against teams that I have played as or against,
Yeah.
at least once, preferably twice. Uh, or teams that play very similarly to that. I think I could up my game significantly by just sitting down and playing some games against myself as various different types of teams until I've covered everything at least
Okay.
twice. That
Fair
would
enough.
be huge. It would force me into also playing around with list building,
Yeah.
and knowing what the other team is able and capable and wants to do is an important part of top tier play.
Yep.
There's a theme in all the games I did well at LVO and scored max points and won were games that I was familiar with the other team that was playing, and the games I lost were teams I wasn't familiar with, Harlequins and Astroyani. Um,
Fair.
I think I definitely suffered for not playing a lot of games. That said, I think that for me, even though I haven't played a lot of games, I've played similar games that are not Warhammer or Kill Team, uh, uh, but like a lot of like a lot of old flash games, strategy games, or computer
Sure.
strategy
Yeah.
games, the tactics translate somewhat, and
Yeah.
then some practice at Kill Team helps with that. Uh, I would also say at something like LVO, it's very much about the mentality. Um, when you go to
Yeah.
a tournament and it's day three after you've been competing in other games, and
Mm.
now you have to just do game and then game and then game, and you have to be on your game for every single one of those.
Yes.
Um, uh, Most people who are not used to that find that incredibly wearing and exhausting, and
Yeah.
will their play will slip.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a lot of experience with. I used to do competitive debate, and I went to about 100 debate tournaments in college. So
Right.
doing competitive tournaments, I think of any type, Warhammer or not, helps build up that mentality of being able to make it through that marathon without
Yeah.
struggling.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No, that's definitely a good point. The nature of a competitive day out. Suddenly, the first time I ever did one, I was like, "Oh, I've had 3 games. That's enough, isn't it? Do they really want a fourth?" But yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for jumping in there. Please continue
Oh
with
no,
your
it
games.
was interesting. Game two, I lose with 6 points. Now I'm on the
Right.
24 point tables. 1-1, 24 points, which is people that were who were winning with an average of like 12 to 13 points, and people were losing with like an average of like about 6 points, where I lost.
Okay. Yeah.
At 24 points, 1-1, that was an above average table, but definitely nowhere near a top table. Nowhere near.
Okay.
Um, so going to into an above average table, my round three, my opponent was playing Primaris, all Primaris. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
I thought it was an interesting thematic list. Cool guy, and was definitely like seemed to have brought a list that he thought was like he liked the theme of, he liked the aesthetic of, and was, you know what, let's just try and win with it.
Great.
And
Yeah.
But unfortunately for him, he only brought two Reavers. The rest were all intercessors, and things
Okay.
just went downhill from there. Just like with the Necron list, once something your 17 point intercessor is getting tied up by bugs,
Yeah.
and I outnumbered him on objectives, it's like there's not much he can do.
Yeah.
He also had bad luck with shooting early, but it's just a really bad matchup for a shooting team.
Right.
And so I don't think there's a lot more he could have done while taking Primaris. And it's part of why earlier we said that Grey Knights struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
Grey Knights, I think, are better off than Primaris,
Okay.
even though they have one fewer model,
Yeah.
because the combination of the psychic powers and better melee, they're more likely to take things out of action that try and tie them up in melee.
Yes.
And they have three chances to try and take things out of option by adding the psychic phase instead of just two.
Sure.
So I don't think intercessors are super competitive,
Okay.
uh, and I would rather play Grey Knights than Primaris.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, certainly every time I'm playing Grey Knights, I'm like, my God, I wish I had the two wounds of a Primaris. That would be amazing. But of course, from your perspective, you don't care about that. You are thinking purely about killing power because you know that to counter your Gellerpox list, you need to take out those bugs, move on, get on to an objective. Me having another wound, I assume you're thinking, just means that, well, you're tied up by a bug for another turn. Who cares? It's
I
irrelevant
think
almost.
most top tier lists uh, tend to rely on some combination of three things: killing power, uh, horde and swarm, or uh, like movement shenanigans. Uh,
Okay,
I my list falls squarely into the movement shenanigans list.
sure.
I think,
Yeah.
and sometimes a little bit of horde.
Okay.
And I think Michael's El Asuryani list is similar.
Yeah.
You get the Tyranids list. That one was like horde, 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 horde,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a little bit of movement shenanigans. And
Okay.
then the some teams that do well do just have like a lot of killing power. Like I think the Immortals list that also made the semifinals, uh, uh, that list with AP -2 rapid fire was trying to kill things, and was doing pretty well at that. I
Hmm.
think uh, while Grey Knights are, it's easier to kill them than Primaris. I think both of them tend to go to suffer from the same issues against like top tier teams. If a top tier team, like if a competitive team is trying to kill your Primaris or Grey Knights rather than tie them up, it's probably
Yeah.
because they can.
Right.
So overcharged plasma, flails, lictors,
Yeah.
those will all kill Primaris just as easily as Grey Knights.
Sure.
But Grey Knights will do better because of their better offensive capability against things like Gaunts and Gellerpox
Right.
and stuff like that, because they can actually trim down the horde faster than intercessors can.
Yeah.
And if they do get tied up, they have something they can do about it.
Sure.
So that's why I would rate Grey Knights more highly than Intercessors. If your positioning is off enough that you are getting tied up or killed early on with Grey Knights, I feel like you are likely to get the same with Intercessors, even with the extra wound.
Fair. So, Grey Knights, second from last, not last. Good. Excellent.
I don't. I don't think Grey Knights are super competitive. I don't think they're last. I
We
mean,
could we could get
I don't
into
know.
that afterwards
Okay.
because that's a huge topic, isn't it? Do you want to keep going to the next game?
Okay, yeah. So game four. Game three. I ended up getting 17 points. I missed on uh, there was one secondary that's charged three models because 2 rounds I only
Right.
charged two models. So I missed it
Okay.
by one.
Right.
Um, but you know, uh, I'll take the win with almost max points. So
Yeah.
now with what 41 points, averaging uh can't do math. Averaging 14 points per game. Now I'm
Yeah.
solidly at one of the top 2-1 tables.
Okay.
Uh, the hope is that some of the people who've gone 3-0 have been going 3-0, but in like hard to win games and like
Yeah.
winning with like 12 points
Yeah.
or fewer in some of those wins, so that if they lose their next game, I will be able to just, if
Jump past
score
them. Yeah.
well, yeah, just jump past them
Yeah.
because I've been scoring very well except in my loss. And game
Okay.
four, I face against Heretic Astartes Cultist 20 model Cultist spam.
Cool.
Uh,
Okay.
and I look over and he's fielding brutal assault weapons on all of them except for like a heavy stubber
Right.
CSM with plasma and something like that. And I'm
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
This matchup comes down to either getting turn one, or if he gets turn one, mind gaming him. Uh,
Okay.
and so what I took my 13 model list. I advanced my veteran mutant, not my Hulk. This time I took a veteran mutant
Right.
and a combat Nasher Screamer because I knew my Nasher Screamer, my Nightmare Hulk would need to put in work and kill anything it got near. So I wanted to take the five attack one rather than the four attack veteran.
Okay.
So I advance my mutant up the board and just block off one of the two choke points that have objectives. And he looks at it and he's like, "How good is it in melee?" And I'm like, "I mean, it's strength four, toughness four, two attacks with some AP. Like, he can do some work. But he's not amazing. He's not a Hulk, but like he can do some work." And he kind of like thinks for a moment, and he advances everything without charging it. And I'm like. He
Okay.
got first turn. He chose not to charge. He decided he
Okay.
wanted to. Sorry, not advance. He moved it forward so he could shoot it off the table with pistols.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I which I thought was a strange decision, but like that was what I was hoping for. I was like, uh, yeah, don't uh, he's better than one of your cultists. He's not amazing, but like he's solid in melee.
Yeah.
And I think I gave him some specialism or something.
Okay.
And oh yeah, he's veteran. So that
Yeah.
didn't help.
Yeah.
And so he saw that and decided not to go for the charge, which I think was a mistake because that let me charge him instead.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, and on the other side of the field, I had my combat. He moved up and advanced forward and took the objective, and I just countercharged on with my Nasher Screamer and a whole bunch of bugs, and I made some fairly long charges, which was lucky. But all of a sudden, I have this just melee monster mulching some cultists on one side, and
Yeah.
by the end of round one, I had that objective, and he never got that objective again in the game. And on the other side, I tar pitted his tar pit with my tar pit at the choke point, and I held that objective for the entire game. So
Okay.
I capped out at 18 points by the end of round three because I held every objective and I scored every secondary every round.
Right.
And that game, I mean, that's the way to for something that's melee horde plus a melee monster to deal with a melee horde. You always have an advantage, which is
Right.
why I think that having a lictor in a Tyranid list as an option is huge because it lets you deal with other all melee horde lists dramatically more effectively than if you
Mm.
just bring cons.
Okay. Yep. No. From what other people are saying, that is the general consensus. Yeah. Yeah.
So that game I ended up getting max points, and I ended up with 59 points after 4 games. The only
Okay.
person who had more than that was Michael with his Eldar, who had
Ah.
gone undefeated. So he was the top ranked team at the tournament, top ranked player at the tournament going into the semifinals. And
Right.
then next after that, there was like one almost undefeated team that had 56 points, and then the next highest 2-1 team had 53 points. So I was
Okay.
well above that with 59,
Yep.
and I think that speaks to a viable. Like there are two, I think, good strategies for going into like high level for going into a
Yeah.
competitive tournament. One of them is try to pick a team where you can be competitive in every game and have a good shot at winning each game. And the other one, which is so that is not what I picked. The other one
Right. Okay.
is pick a team where if you win with max points,
Okay. Yeah.
and hope that matchups and plays favor you enough that either you can like squeak out a win in bad matchups or just coast off of the strength of your good matchups.
Okay.
Especially because some of those good matchups are against like Tyranid spam. It's a good matchup against that. Like even like plasma, like overcharging plasma into -1 to hit is really bad, and tying up plasma is fairly straightforward. Even like plasma guard is not too bad. Death guard, unless they bring enough poxwalkers, uh, to counter my horde. If they bring 7 models, that's a good matchup for me. If they bring like 9, 10 models, fewer blight launchers and more boxwalkers, that starts to be a real bad matchup for me. But like the competitive Death Guard lists are good matchups for me. So I was hoping get good matchups against people who don't know how Gellerpox plays, score max points in my wins, try to score as many points as possible in my losses and just play for points and hope to make it in on points rather
Sure.
than
Yeah.
necessarily win losses.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, hope that I get the matchups against top lists that I know I can beat fairly straightforwardly.
Okay.
Um, but then we get into the semifinals match where I did not get that
Yes.
matchup. So
Okay.
I told Michael, we grabbed some water before the game, and I told Michael as we were kind of off camera, not on stream. I said, Michael, gonna be honest. He said something like, I hope that all I'm hoping is that we look good on camera in front of his wife who might be
Right.
watching the stream,
Yeah.
and that no one looks like a fool. And I was like, Michael, gonna be honest. The way I play my list, the way my list plays out, one of us is going to look like a fool by round 3. Whether it's you
Right.
or me, one of us will be looking like a fool,
Okay.
uh, because that's just the nature of my high variability list. And it turned out it was me. So there were a couple of reasons. There were a lot of reasons why I lost. The biggest one is I was unfamiliar with Asuryani and
Yep.
thinking of them like less mobile shooting teams that do have better guns than Asuryani. I kind of played into that and didn't realize I should have. I could see his points cost on his command roster. I didn't realize just how many models he would be fielding, and I
Right.
fielded my 2 Nightmare Hulk list instead of my 1 Nightmare Hulk list.
Okay.
That allowed him to outnumber me, which meant that I couldn't try and tie him up. I
Right.
had to try and start killing him with my Nightmare Hulks. And that was a big strategic mistake. From that point on, it would be an uphill battle and would require dice to go my way a lot to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second thing I didn't know about his list, I like again, all of these things. This is why it's so important to be familiar with every team. Uh, Someone can say this model overwatches on fives and also like has 2 guns, and that
Yeah.
doesn't like, but they're also telling you 30 other things about 30 other like all the strengths and toughnesses
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
abilities of everything else. So it doesn't, so you don't have enough time to think on the fly about any new information
Yeah.
and how that will feed into your tactics. So I didn't realize, though I should have, that his veteran had great Overwatch on 5 ups, 4 shots, and 2 different weapons, so you can make 2 different injury rolls if the 2 different weapons both
Yes.
hit.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like that's if I realized that, and if I play that list again, which I probably won't unless Michael goes to a tournament, but I would
Yeah.
love to have a rematch against him. Anyways, uh, if I play that list again, there's only 2 things that I can try and do against that particular model. It's great that he can only bring one of those, but there's only 2 things I can do. I can try and charge it with a Nightmare Hulk, which can survive getting shot, or we can try and charge it with a uh, mutant, which
Right.
maybe. I mean, at least it doesn't have the +1 to wound to injury tests
Mm.
like the bugs have. And it has 5 up and disgustingly resilient, 5 up invuln and disgustingly resilient, so and toughness 4. So like it has a chance. But the only one of those I brought in my nine model list was my leader. So I was like, the only thing that will survive Overwatch is if I charge my leader into your scariest model on the board.
Right.
And my Hulks I had mispositioned. I had put them. I had overloaded one side of the board that had more objectives, and basically been like, I give up this other objective on the other side of the board. I'm gambling that I can take your objectives from you with my
Mm.
Hulks,
Mm.
since I have a veteran Hulk, and I can, and you'll have to stay more than 2 inches away from the center of those objectives
Right.
because my Hulks are really scary in melee.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was my way of trying to make the best of a bad situation. Uh, so I think Michael's right when he says that losing someone to Overwatch has a big psychological effect,
Okay.
because looking at the state of the board, I should have charged my leader in, and that's
Okay.
it. That's just a really hard thing to say. Uh,
That's not a position anyone wants to be in. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, Round 1, I should have charged my leader into his scariest model, knowing there's a high probability I'll lose him. Uh,
Right.
so I didn't do that, which meant he had someone in my back lines, which never happens,
No. No.
who was terrifying. And then I failed a whole bunch of my charges.
Sure.
Uh, I also my veteran Hulk advanced 1 inch, so I went 5 inches instead of four.
That's
That's
bad. Yeah.
not getting into the enemy backline. So
No.
he failed the charge. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, I lost a one of my bugs to that, and I lost another bug like during turn one shooting, and I'm like, okay, I mean this is bad, but if I get some key charges off, I might be able to salvage something. Uh, I figured at that point I was probably going to lose, but I wasn't ready to like mentally give in yet. Uh, Turn two, I get first turn again. I charge my veteran nightmare Hulk a second time, and this time, uh, in addition to once more for like the second time in the game, failing the charge and then failing the tactical reroll charge. Oh no, that not that one. He didn't. I didn't have time to do the tactical reroll charge because I charged his Melta. His Melta rolled a 6 and
Yes, you
then rolled
did. Yeah.
damage 5,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I didn't make any of the disgustingly resilience, and then he killed me outright. And
Painful. Yeah.
he also killed a bug on Overwatch with 6 up Overwatch.
Right.
So I lost 41 points of models to Overwatch in the first 2 rounds. From that point on, his strategy of feed an elf to the scary Hulk every round and outnumber the rest of the bugs and just shoot them off the board
Yeah.
worked perfectly.
Right.
Uh, so here's where I want to talk about though
Yes.
how I would deal with that and how I think many lists can deal with that.
Go for it. Let's take Michael down. If he's the best damn player you've ever met, we need to team up. We can't
Yes,
have this.
he's
We
the best
need.
damn player I've ever met. That is not the best damn list I've ever met, but the way Michael
Fair.
plays it is really good. And I think if he were playing like I mean, I think if Michael were playing that Tyranid list that won the tournament, I think he would have won the tournament.
Sure.
And he was a few bad rolls away from winning the tournament with Eldar.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
anyways, so I think the first thing is definitely need to at least have as many models as he does. He
Okay.
he has a huge advantage for the same reason that my teams have a huge advantage if they can outnumber you. Uh, and
He
so
runs a 12 model list, is it?
he varies it up a little bit, but it did have 12 models at,
Okay.
when I
Yeah.
faced it.
Sure.
So if I had brought 13 models, then I would have one Hulk and 12 bugs and mutants and stuff like that, which would
Yeah.
have given me more mutants who could charge into the scary model. Would have
Yeah.
given me more models that can the curse mites who can reroll their failed charges, which would have mitigated all my failed charges that game.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, it would have forced him to either fall back with more models or like get tied up a little bit, and I could have contested objectives a little bit better.
Okay.
Uh, so uh, I think that's one thing I could have that would have made the game a lot more fair, balanced. Well, I mean it was fair. I just lost. So
Well. Yeah.
the other thing though is I think I think that I needed I just needed to I think everyone who suspects they might face an Asuryani list, which may not be very many people,
It seems
but
niche case. Yeah.
spending some time looking at all the teams will also have you look at Asuryani. And I think knowing that better and spending more mental energy during the game on which models are which, and not taking needless risks. Um, I am normally fairly fairly ready to take that 1 in 6 chance that someone will blow me off the table on
Okay.
Overwatch. Um,
Yeah.
and I factor in that I will lose at least one bug to Overwatch, and I'll
Uh-huh.
lose at least like 2 models to shooting turn one. That's
Okay.
just an assumption I have every game.
Sure.
So I think uh, having more models. He had volume of shots, uh, and I don't have anything with a good armor save. Stuff with a
Okay.
good armor save, I think, would do reasonably well against his list, but then would struggle because usually you have to pay for that with fewer models. So uh, that's difficult. Um, so I think I would have to resort to trying to tie him up with just outnumbering him with bugs, veteran, mutant, and then I might honestly you just have my Hulk just go Exarch hunting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He has one model that will ruin me on Overwatch, and
Yeah.
I have one model that I do not have to worry about on Overwatch at all. And if
Yeah.
he stays away from that, then I use mutants nearby to try and tie him up long enough for my bugs to get in and just like juggle charges and
Yeah.
hold him in place. After that, I round three, I don't really worry too much about shooting. Round two, a little bit, but round three, most models will either have fallen back. Of his models will have either fallen back from stuff that made their charge round two, or if they don't, I will get almost all of my models into melee, and so he won't have valid targets to shoot at.
Okay.
So I think not getting wrecked on Overwatch round one, uh, knowing that he might be able to kill my one Hulk if I try and move it into melee. So instead of doing that, using it to hunt down his Exarch, and then just sending bugs swarming up the table and trying to tie him up so that he won't get to shoot until round four. That I think is a potentially winning strategy. He
Okay.
has things to do against it. He, retreated a lot of his front line when I tried to charge, which is partly why I failed my charges.
Right. Okay.
Um,
So instead of
which
going
is
for the
also something
Overwatches,
no one
he
else
would.
does.
Yes.
No
Yeah.
one, no one else that I have played, which is part of, maybe I just haven't played enough, at enough tournaments. But no one else that I have played actively like retreats their models, like lots of their models from the front lines backwards,
Sure. Sure.
in order to avoid me charging them. I tend to declare multiple targets when I charge, so that
Okay.
way they have to retreat multiple if they're going to retreat, to mitigate that strategy. But yeah, so I think that helps to mitigate a lot of his advantages, and then I can attempt to tie him up enough to win.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Would you? So obviously, I'm going to clickbait title this part "How to Beat the Best Kill Team Player in the World." That goes without saying. Um.
uh,
So
if you want to beat the best kill team player in the world, maybe don't play Gellerpox.
okay. All right. There you
That,
go. That'll be the takeaway.
that's the way I would try and beat him with Gellerpox. That's the way I would try and beat him with Hormagaunts, and that's actually basically the way that Hormagaunt spam works, and that's part of how Miguel managed to win.
Right.
Um, although he didn't into the uh, Exarch, he charged from outside. No, outside 9 inches into the flamer, and then managed to make saves charging into the X. So I don't know. I would say Hormagaunt spam is a good way to deal with that list.
Yeah.
It's just a bad matchup because you can outnumber him so much.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Uh, but yeah, so if you want to beat the best player in the world that I have played,
Yeah.
uh, uh, I would say don't play Gellerpox.
Okay. Uh, to be fair, most people are already taking that advice. So yeah, good. Good.
They've got to step up on me. Uh, but hey, if you want a real clickbaity title, uh, here's why Gellerpox Infected are going to be the best kill team faction in Arena. And it's that Geller shift. It's until it's
Yeah.
FAQ'd, you
Yeah.
have a 1 in 2 chance of just tying things up and blocking them from moving past their front door, one of their two front
Yes.
doors.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it will be, when people play against it, they will be surprised that you can do that. They will probably not be very fond of you afterwards.
No.
I would not expect very many honorable opponent votes from that.
No.
And hopefully we can get either GW to FAQ it, or alternately, maybe Gellerpox will be a popular faction. Who knows?
No. Hey, I mean, they need something because I don't hear them being talked about that much. So give them that also win button. Then we'll see them on the table, won't we? Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay. Okay. So that's how to beat Michael, which if you were to play him again, that's what you do.
That's what I would try.
Okay. So
Uh,
the final game.
the final game. I didn't play any other game, although we technically
Oh,
the
that's right.
Chucky, who was the other one who lost in semifinals, he was playing Necrons.
Yeah.
The two of us were tied for third, fourth, and we were told, "Oh, figure it out in some way." So in order to figure out like who gets to pick first in the prizes for the top four.
Okay.
So we decided to have a very loud, very raucous rock paper scissors game,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
and apparently we could be heard on the Twitch stream,
Oh, right.
even though we were like 10 feet away. Um, that said, a lot of us did watch the finals game,
Right.
and we all, all being the people who stayed around were either friends of some of the people who were in the top, in the finals game, or were like top players who just wanted to stick it out to the end, or were semifinalists who lost.
Right. Yeah.
And we all kind of had this bad habit of critiquing what the two players were doing, and like the organizers of the event and the guy on the Twitch stream kept on being like, guys, I can hear you, you need to get further away from
Right.
this.
Right.
And the organizers of the event were like, stop talking about tactics and how to win in front of the two people playing the game.
Yes, that's not
So
taken well. Yeah. Yeah.
so we ended up like backing like 15 feet, and like every like minute or so would like jump in to like see the state of the
See
game, and
what's
like
changed. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
But
okay.
we had a very lively like ongoing discussion of like, well, this is the important parts, and I would say that my takeaway from that was that I think we kind of all agreed that Michael had done the best job he could by killing Miguel's warrior round
Turn
one,
one. Yeah. Yeah.
turn one. But that after that, it was a combination of it was hard dice wise.
Right.
Miguel made a lot of very clutch 6-up saves, and
Okay. Yeah.
just Michael wasn't getting as many out of actions and flesh wounds on Hormigons as he needed to be getting to
Yeah.
get them to break
Yeah.
before the end of round three.
Right.
Uh, I think something that was interesting, and part of why watching that game, why instead of saying that Miguel and Michael were the best players I've ever seen, why I think Michael is, I think Miguel knew his faction incredibly well, and I think he
Yeah.
knew the rules incredibly well. He was doing things like positioning Termagants 2.1 inches away from each other so that they couldn't all be
Right.
flamed.
Okay.
He was taking advantage of pylons and consolidations. He was doing a really good job of trying to, the best someone could of basically trying to table Michael. The
Yeah.
problem was watching that game, and maybe this is, when you're like on stream and it's the sixth game of the day, and you probably competed in the 40K tournament Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like time and exhaustion from that, but we felt watching that he wasn't playing to his secondary objectives as well as he could be.
Okay.
He was kind of maneuvering things to try and kill more of Michael's stuff, even though that wouldn't get him his secondaries, and was ignoring some of his secondaries. And we felt that while he did end up winning, he ended up winning in part due to some good dice rolls that like the game could have gone either way in round
Yeah.
three.
Yeah.
We felt that in rounds 2 and 3, had he positioned for secondary objectives better, he could have made it so that Michael would have had a 10% chance of winning instead of a 50% chance.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I think watching, I think we felt that Michael was kind of doing the best he could with a bad situation.
Sure.
I think Hormigons is just a very bad matchup for that Eldar list.
Okay. Yeah.
For similar reasons as to why that Eldar were a bad matchup for the Gellerpox list that I brought. Being able
Yeah.
to outnumber the other side means that you can't take advantage if you're an objective and movement based team like Michael and I are. You can't take advantage of your one real strength.
You can't trade models. Yeah.
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 You can't hold objectives. You can't outmaneuver the other team. You can't say, "Hey, yeah, I'll lose one model, but I tie you up." So
Yeah,
not against
yeah.
Torbjorns.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, so I would say I think Miguel is probably a better player than I am.
Okay.
I think Michael is the best player I've played against.
Okay. Fair. Although I've got to admit, just to add in, when you first said that, you hadn't also told me you've only played 10 games. So
Fair.
changes it a bit, but I'm still
Hey,
going to
hey,
use the clickbait title.
Eddie,
It's fine.
Eddie, don't say that. If you say that, people will know that the clickbait title is incorrect.
It's fine. It's fine. I don't
Okay.
care. Yeah, I don't really care. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they'll have had to have watched the whole of it to realise that we're lying. So it's fine. And if they've watched it,
Uh,
I don't care what they
well,
do. Yeah.
okay. That's I think that's most of my thoughts on Kill Team these days.
Okay.
I
Excellent.
hope uh I hope my credibility hasn't been too shot by the limited number of games I've played. Well, hey, I'd only played 10, 11 games before LVO. Now I've played
Right.
16 games.
Oh, well, you're a master then, Grand Master. Hello. Yeah, 16
Exactly.
games, blimey. No, well, I mean, to be fair, uh, you managed to take a team after having only played 10, 10, 15 games all the way up to the semi-finals. There's something there. I don't know what, but there's something that one could argue is better than experience.
Uh it's if you want to outperform your experience level, play a team no one has seen before and
Yeah.
play a team that is extremely high variability and hope that when you just hope that when you win really hard and
Yes.
use that. um, that's not going to be super useful at Nova,
Right.
the grand tournament there. Once you're sorted into pods, so even if you make it to the top 8 pod,
Mm.
each game then becomes best of 3. So
Oh.
you
Okay.
can, so once someone's played against you once, even if you win, between them being unfamiliar with the team and between having strategies and tactics they haven't seen before, they'll be able to counter that in rounds 2 and 3.
Yes. Interesting. With talking about Nova, but not specifically Nova, are you planning to go to any more tournaments anytime soon?
I will be going to Nova. Unfortunately, the Age of Sigmar and Kill Team tournaments are on the same days, so
Fair.
it's not clear. So I'm going to go to one of those two. I don't know which one I'll go to. I think I will perform better in the Kill Team tournament than the Age of Sigmar tournament,
Okay.
but I'm not totally sure. I'm still undecided.
Okay. Quick side note: what's your army in Sigma?
Demons of Slanesh.
Ah.
So
Okay.
once more, taking a kind of lower mid-tier team that I don't think people have seen as much of, and trying
Sure.
to find ways to win with it.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Are you much of a podcast man?
I listen to a few podcasts. Haven't been getting
Okay.
into as many. I tend to listen to YouTube videos more
Okay.
than
Okay.
podcasts when with Warhammer. So
Well, I would recommend The Honest Wargamer.
the
Uh,
Honest Wargamer.
for Age of Sigmar competitive content, they're pretty good. Yeah. There you
Okay,
go. There you go. Um,
absolutely. Hell, you know what? I will give it a look.
you should. Yeah, they're
Listen. I'll give it a listen.
either one, whatever. They're on YouTube as well, so that's fine. But okay, so you will be. Is that August? Nova?
Late August, early September.
Late August, early September. Okay. And
So
then, is there any particular reason you're not going to another one in between, or is there no other one announced? Or
I will be going to an age. I'll be going to at least one Age of Sigmar local tournament
oh, okay,
in Massachusetts in May.
cool,
But I still getting into this tournament thing,
sure,
um,
okay,
and it's there are surprisingly few tournaments like in New York City where I'm based. All the tournaments are like, oh yeah, if you have a car, you can go to these suburbs of New York City, and I'm like, well, I live in New York.
right,
I don't have a car.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so we'll see.
Okay,
Uh,
fair enough.
but I'm planning
Fair
on
enough.
going to Nova, and I might do Kill Team there, and I'm definitely doing Kill Team at LVO next year. So
Excellent. Okay.
hoping
Okay.
to get that rematch in with Michael.
Yes, well, I believe he's planning on going back as well. Let's hope so. Be a clash of the Titans. Although I think he says he's going to stick with Azarani actually. Yes, I think he said that in the interview. Because that's his team. So yeah, he plays them for the love, not for the apparently amazing competitiveness that is the Azarani. Yeah. Did you have anything else to say, possibly about how brilliantly your miniatures were painted?
I did.
Oh,
Uh, hopefully, we'll be able to put up some pictures of the Nightmare Hulks and some of the Gellerpox. But they were painted by my friend Greg. He's at Hungarian Painting Hussars at gmail.com. Hopefully, we'll get a link somewhere in the description.
somewhere.
Uh, somewhere, you know.
Hmm.
And he takes commissions. If anyone likes the look of these Gellerpox, he's I can vouch for his painting skill.
Awesome. US based.
U.S. based, yeah, New York area.
There you go. Awesome. Well, we will definitely put it on the screen or in the. I don't know. It'll be available somewhere. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, it's been 2 hours and 10 minutes, so that's probably enough. Um, it's going to take a long time to edit. That's yeah.
I apologize. I thought I would be able to keep it short.
No, no, no. Content for the content gods. That's what YouTube's all about. Okay. Well, do you want to say goodbye?
Uh, well, it's been a pleasure being on YouTube with you. Thanks for having me on, and I hope everyone at least takes a look at Gellerpox Infected. I think they're amazing sculpts, amazing models, and I think that it's good to get some underutilized factions going.
I definitely agree, and certainly I bought Rogue Trader when it came out, and I flicked through the Rogue Trader Codex for Gellerpox, and I even have a video about it. I did not remember a single thing that Gellerpox did, and so when I heard that Gellerpox had made it to the top tables, I was like, oh my god, should I have actually paid attention? So thank you very much for teaching not just me, but the whole, I don't know, like 4 people that are going to watch the whole of this episode uh, about Gellerpox Infected. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for watching this. If you have stuck around till the end, this has been Glass Half Dead and Chris, who has no social media that he wants me to plug. And thank you very much for watching. Hopefully, you haven't been annoyed by my clickbait titles that I've posted throughout the week, teasing up to the full interview. Anyway, this has been Glass Half Dead, signing off. Goodbye. There you go. It's done.
What'd you think?